Hello viewers, today is a very special day. My first race in the RCF. First race around the Nordschleife in the Bilstein BMW 330 race car. Jimmy, good luck mate.
Thank you,
We're
mate.
finally here, we're doing it. Have a good one.
Mate, this is epic.
Now the format of this event is quite complicated, so what I'm going to do is leave a pinned comment down below and go over all of it there. And as for the cars we'll be coming up against, this BMW M4 GT4 will be gracing the circuit with us, along with a scarcely believable 150 other cars on the track. So you see many cars. We've got 150 something cars out on track with us. We're in a class of 24. We've actually got the slicks on, which are Michelins. And because the Michelins are so good, we actually have a time penalty. Most of the cars here have Hankook tyres on. So you can see we've got our brand new Bilstein suits, looking great in there, alongside the whole car. Moment of truth. Look at that. Hopefully it fits. There we go.
That looks like a good fit, mate.
Oh, I've got pockets. Always wanted an ADAC badge. Have a good one, Jimmy. So Jimmy and I did rock, paper, scissors to decide who goes first. He went scissors, I went rock. No, other way round. He won it anyway. Excuse me, can you get out of my shot, please? Off he goes, hopefully to come back in about an hour's time. Proud moment, Misha?
Yes.
Watching him go out there?
They grow up so fast and
Yeah.
fly away from the nest.
There he is. Okay, we're underway. Jimmy has started. And yeah, he's got like 5 or 6 laps now to do. Go on, Jimmy.
Come on the outside.
So there was just a crash on this corner just a moment ago, which means there's obviously a double yellow, he couldn't overtake. And I can't show you crashes, unfortunately, but it looks like he's going around okay. He's got a couple of laps left, and then it's my turn. So this is something I'm going to have to watch out for during my stints. Of course, there's lots of cars, lots of varying speeds. There are inevitably going to be collisions and code 60 zones and yellow flags.
Did you know that sloths can hold their breath underwater longer than dolphins? Up to 40 minutes. And dolphins only 10.
Most cars have done their sort of first stint now, they're all beginning to come in. Jimmy is on his last lap. It's not like a driver change where you have to rush in 30 seconds. We're gonna get in the car, fuel it, just easing into our Nurburgring racing driver career. It was finally time for me to get into the car. We called Jimmy in, and as you can see, it's a very busy pit lane. This isn't the Grand Prix loop, this isn't even the tourist pit lane, this is the Nurburgring Nordschleife mini pit lane. But thankfully, Jimmy was able to bring the car back in one piece. How was it, man?
It was so good. Fucking hell. It's like there are spits of rain, but there's nothing really out there yet.
So here we go, guys. Trying to exit this incredibly congested pit lane was a bit of a nightmare, so we had to get some help from the mechanics to try to navigate our way out. Eventually I was able to squeeze my way past and get onto the fuel bowser, which we can see here, so fueling the car up for my 7-ish, is it 7 laps? 7 or 8 laps, before eventually leaving the pit lane to drive onto the track for the first time in a competitive event. Now immediately 2 cars go flying up the inside here. So I'm kind of joining a live circuit where I have to kind of just get accustomed to it very quickly. Now this first lap is just an outlap, and therefore it doesn't actually count for anything. I can drive this as slow as I like. It doesn't actually matter too much. So that was quite a nice way to gently get introduced to life here at the Nurburgring during a race. But even though we could drive it as slowly as possible, I found that this car was actually pretty good, and I was actually overtaking quite a lot of cars. I was certainly overtaking more cars than I was getting overtaken by. Now look at this guy, he actually points out of the window to kind of point me through. And this race is very much about communication with the other cars. So it isn't a straight up race, it is more of a time trial event. And therefore you don't really want to be tripping over each other, you don't really want to be slowing each other down. So if a car comes up behind and it's a lot quicker, might as well just let it go. And likewise, if you come up to a slower car, they tend to let you pass. Up behind this, it looks like a 240 BMW up the hill. Now I ran him quite close, he had a bit more power, but coming up towards the carousel, he actually indicated to the right here, so some nice communication. It's really easy to go past people when they communicate like that, putting the indicators on and easily getting the move done. Now later on in this outlap, this is towards the end of the circuit. There's a single wave yellow, which technically you don't actually have to slow down for, but then you have a double wave yellow where you have to be going 120 kilometers an hour or less. And that was for this incident here, where there's obviously some sort of collision with barrier and ambulance on the track having to slow down. That is very normal here for this event, so that's something we're going to be seeing quite a lot of. At the end of the lap, pulling down one of these markers just to signify which lap we're on. Each time we come around onto the Dottinger, we're going to remove one of those so I know which lap I'm on. And adjusting the mirror to make sure I'm fully comfortable before coming around T13 to begin my confirmation lap. Now, I explained it in the comments down below in a pinned comment, but let me quickly go through it. This is my confirmation lap. The confirmation lap I do has to be the same speed as the confirmation lap that Jimmy did earlier. So if he did a 10-minute lap time, I have to try and do a 10-minute lap time. It's a really weird format, but to be honest, we are here just purely for practice and just to get used to the car and just push as much as we can. So I'm not really going to try and aim for Jimmy's lap time. I didn't even know what it was. So we're just going to try and go as quick as possible and go past as many cars as we can. So through Hassenbach, trying to get a nice exit here to get past this green BMW, late on the brakes. And this was really an important factor, I think, in this RCN race. Just making sure you're not hanging back with traffic. Every time you wait or you hesitate behind a car, you're just losing time all the time. So I felt like, let's just be aggressive, let's go for it. Obviously, let's not take any stupid risks, but let's really go for it and try to be quite forthright with our overtaking. So onto the very fast section here towards Schwedenkreuz. Very tricky corner at the best of times. Very fast part of the track this. Over this crest, and then we're going to get onto the brakes. Car in front, we're going to try and see where it's going. Actually indicates to the right hand side, which is always really good. When the cars indicate, it's so much more obvious where they're going. And you can get the pass done quite clearly. So down past the Yokohama Bridge towards the Foxhole, always a tricky section. Wave yellow flag, and then we have some emergency vehicles. Again, this is just a normal part of racing around here. Driving past recovery trucks and safety cars. But you just have to get on with your lap and just continue. So we get past that with no problem. Now there are over 150 cars on the track, but as you can see, I'm in a bit of an empty spot at the moment. Given how big, of course, the Nordschleife is, those 150 cars do spread out quite quickly as we ride on board in the aim camera inside the car, using a GoPro on the helmet otherwise. A couple of cars here, flying past them. And how about this guy? He's going to move to the left. So off the racing line, that was quite nice for us. Now you might see in the mirror there's a fast approaching Seat, very quick blue car. You might be able to see. And I was just very conscious of how early do I move out of the way for these guys? He's definitely not close enough yet, so we're not going to lose time by just darting out of the way just yet. So through the chicane, and then miss, hit, miss, difficult corner, and it looks like I've missed all 3 apexes there. Carrying good speed though, into a very slow corner, one of the slowest on the circuit. Up behind, is this guy going to move to the left? Yes, he is. Leaves the space, nicely done. And this guy behind had a lot of power in the Seat, so I felt like, okay, let's just move out of the way now, just slow down slightly, tuck in behind. Maybe could have waited a little bit longer to let him go, but just trying to really become accustomed to how quickly I should let people go. And I don't think it was such a bad job. So you can see here on this section as we head through the Niki Lauda curve, just how much more pace that car has, a lot more power. And this is just something we're going to have to get used to around here, especially when we race NLS, which has GT3 cars which are going to be way quicker than that. And it's going to be very, very difficult getting out the way correctly all the time. A little bit later on in the confirmation lap, coming up through Muck Curve, very dangerous corner this one, past a safety car, and safely navigating them. Into the carousel then, entering this quite late. I feel like this is the best line. The Bilstein suspension, of course, working overtime here, and working beautifully as we exit. Nicely done. Now this is my favourite part of the track, fast and flowing, and it looks like I've got the track to myself at the moment, so let's really enjoy this as we head up the hill, fast left, right, and we can carry a lot of speed there given that it's uphill. Your car kind of really digs into the circuit, carry the speed through onto the power on the exit, dipping over this little crest, and then there's a fast sequence of corners now, and this is where we're going to experience something quite, well, this was actually quite scary for a moment here, because the car very much understeered and wanted to keep going straight, and for the life of me I couldn't work out exactly why that was. I turned off traction control thinking that was enough, but I would have to wait until the Dottinger straight before I could look at the settings of the car to make sure that I have actually turned off all the settings I was meant to. So through Brunchen, YouTube corner as it is affectionately known, into Ice Curve, famously not very grippy, but it looks okay at this point in time. Riding up over the curb on the exit, and we're heading down towards this section once again, Plants Garden, into the jump, where on the previous lap we had a yellow flag, and therefore we'd be looking out for it again, and there indeed it is, the yellow flag, double wave yellow here. So slowing down to 120, just trying to make sure we don't slow down too early. You can definitely slow down too early and lose a couple of seconds by doing that, and then below 60 kilometers an hour for the code 60 section for this crash, which we saw on the previous lap. And this is where it can get quite frustrating, waiting for the green flag. When you can see the green flag doesn't mean you can go, you have to wait until you're next to it before you can go, and there we go. And the marshals and the stewards are very hot on that, so they're always watching you, so you can't really just try and cheat the system. You do have to actually really obey that. So through Galgengolf, and the car wanted to go very straight again. You can see I raised my hand here in kind of frustration. I didn't really know what was going on. It turns out that DSC was not deactivated. I didn't press the right button, and so the car wanted to go slightly straight on the fast corners, which was quite scary, if I'm honest. Really not the kind of time you really want that to happen. Now through Tiergarten, you can see there's some raindrops on the windscreen. So this part of the track, it was slightly raining, which was quite strange to deal with. You might have noticed when I was leaving the pit lane, it was actually raining quite heavily, and so we didn't know what tyres to put on up the inside into Sabine Schmidt's curve. And this is just, again, another normal factor around here where it can rain on one part of the track, but it's completely dry elsewhere. So this was really something to get used to, and to be honest, it can get way worse than this. It was just a small sprinkle of rain. It didn't really affect our grip too much. So through Hassenbach on our first sprint lap. So on a sprint lap, it's just a case of drive as quickly as possible. There's no confirmation lap here. This isn't about trying to match someone else's time. This is just trying to go as quickly as possible. The car wanted to understeer again. So this was something that we would definitely have to go back to the drawing board with and make sure that I know how to deactivate DSC. So the settings on this car were quite strange. Pulling off the marker there, I didn't do it on the main straight, completely forgot to do it. As we hurtle round over the crest here towards Flugplatz, really about bravery here. Minimum speed of 160 kph on this occasion, so carrying some decent speed through that turn. And a little bit later on, just after Adenauer, got a car very slow here. Which side are they going to go? They're going to stay to the right. That's fair enough. And it's really a case of just trying to navigate the traffic as swiftly and as safely as possible. As this guy indicates to the right, nicely done, easy. As there's so many cars on the track, you're out on the track for about 7 laps, and so there's much scope to be in a collision. Now this was the car I drove when I did the permit test a couple of months ago, the E90 BMW, going past them, the exact car, so it's quite interesting to see that. And then coming up the hill, I was about to witness or come up to an incident for the first time. Now, going very quickly, of course, up this section, over 200 kilometers an hour, and as we came through this bit towards Mutt Curve, I just spot this incident in front, and I managed to slow down, did overtake that car, but there wasn't a yellow flag at that moment. Thankfully, everyone got past just fine, and, well, so yeah, first proper incident. Luckily, we weren't involved. We just come up to it after it happened, so surely that's going to be a code 60 zone on the way through on the next lap. So luckily both drivers were fine involved in that one, and yeah, that was not too bad. Luckily we got through just in time. So up behind this guy, not able to get past just before the carousel. We're gonna have to do it on the exit here, hopefully before this fast sweeping section, before Hohe Acht. And yes, we have got the power to get past on the left hand side and get the job done, so we can take this section of the track uninterrupted. Now a little bit further round towards Brunchen, and this guy indicating to the left. You might be able to spot a very fast coming up BMW in the rearview mirror. So only for really the second time in this entire event so far that we're getting overtaken. So there were definitely quite a lot of faster cars out there, but given how spaced out we were, they weren't always actually overtaking me. And there we go. I decided to let him go. He seemed to have a lot of power in that car, so I thought, you know what, you can go past. It's quite interesting watching them go through. And we're going to come up into this yellow flag zone. So it took quite a lot of laps to clear this this incident, then down into the code 60 section. And it's definitely a time where you can slightly just rest and recover and just think about what you're doing. Before, on the exit of this section, overtaken the Dacia Logan. Look at that. Absolutely sent him into the dust. He stood no chance at all. That is world champion stuff right there. Pulling off another marker to signify the completion of another lap. And I must say it was actually quite hard to pull those things off because it was actually a full stretch. Full speed now down the straight. Look at this, 236 kilometers an hour under the Bilstein bridge. And just look at the congestions up in front. It's more like the M25 than it is the Nordschleife. As we try and navigate our way past all of these cars. And we've definitely come up to a bit of a hot spot here. So a lot of my laps so far were fairly uninterrupted. And then you have these little gaggles of cars up the inside here, not hanging about, sending it up the inside into T13. Blue flags waving as we have completed now 3 laps of the race, or we're on lap 3, sorry. As the outlap didn't technically count as a full lap, even though it kind of was. So, up behind this guy, this is one of my favourite sections of the track, hats and back, really carrying the speed over the curb, dropping down through the camber, trying to get a good exit. And once again, just not hanging about. I could have easily waited until after this corner. Might have been better. No, probably wouldn't have been better. I think I gained more time by just getting it done quickly. Now this guy who I let past on the previous lap, having a bit of a slower lap here and deciding to let me go. So taking turns here just to let each other pass. So I really liked the the communication here between the drivers as we're just trying to just get our laps done up the inside of the Cayman, who left plenty of space into Bergwerk here. And we're going to come up into this slow zone. We saw the incident on the previous lap. We're in the double wave yellow section now, and then into the code 60, trying to brake as late as possible just to make sure. It's like a pit limiter line basically, trying to brake so that just as we get to the zone we are going below 60. And here is that incident now being cleared up. As you can see, the two cars involved, pretty heavy damage, but we are thankfully not involved in that one. Still a code 60 zone, as I believe there was another car stranded on the right hand side here. Still trying to take an efficient line. Even though you're going 60, it might be tempting just to kind of just dawdle, but you still want to take an efficient line on the track to make sure you minimize the distance you travel. So you can still gain time or just not lose time by being sensible with how you navigate the double yellows and the code 60s. It's not really a time to rest, as I kind of just said. You still have to be concentrated and ready at all times. So through the carousel, and the car it feels nice through there, to be honest. It is very bumpy, of course, but the car kind of just handles it beautifully. So no real complaints as we head up through. I mean, these corners here are beautiful. This left-hander, you really carry the speed through, and then this left-right, again, carrying a lot of speed given the uphill nature of it. So really enjoying this part of the track. Later on, again, you see these incidents do take quite a lot of time to clear up. In the NLS, it won't take quite so long. But going past this BMW on the exit here, and not hanging about. This was lap number 4, and this kind of shows you just how close it can be through the Stefan Beloff S. And this guy indicates to the right, and there is the space, but I do have to take a bit of the curb as well. So it just shows you, even though space was afforded, it's not always easy. Now this was the finest overtake of all time, one of the most important overtakes you're ever likely to witness. Fully in the slipstream now of the Dacia Logan, pulling out, and boom, overtake done. He stood no chance at all. And that's exactly what world champions are made of right there, guys. As we hurtle down the hill into the compression, just trying to carry as much speed through here. This really is a section that requires a lot of bravery. Then late on the brakes at the top of the hill. As not as many raindrops on the windscreen this time around, so the rain having its moment earlier in the day, but it's not quite having the same effect now. So this is lap number 5, so quite a long old stint, as you can probably tell, and I've cut out quite a lot of the footage. And I guess if you're doing 7 laps at roughly 9 minutes a lap, you're looking at over an hour on the circuit. So it is a fairly long old stint out there. Not feeling too much fatigue personally, but the car, I would say, is beginning just to slightly understeer by this point, as the front tyres just begin to slightly go off. And it's really a case of managing that through the stint. I guess making sure you don't drive too hard too soon to wear out your tyres. You do have to make sure that you extend the life of the tyres evenly through the stint. The car going nicely through there. So this problem I had with the car understeering and going straight on through some of the fast corners, I was just trying to drive around the problem as I couldn't quite disengage the DSC assist. And so I was just trying to be a bit smoother on the steering wheel. Even though I tend to try to underdrive the car slightly anyway, I felt like I really needed to underdrive it even more. Switching back to the GoPro here, so switching between 2 cameras, we have the GoPro, which is attached to the front top of the helmet, just above the visor, and then the aim camera just behind myself. Now through towards Plants Garden. This guy moves to the left hand side. Bit of traffic here. Is this guy in the silver car going to move as well? Yes, he is, over to the left hand side. And quite a couple of fast decisive moves there. And I was working out as I was going through, as we're going to go through the Stefan Beloff S here, flat out for pretty much the first time. It's actually the second time. Now I was working out that the faster you come up to people, the more they kind of move out of the way for you. I think people will look in their mirror and think, okay, this guy's coming up quick, I'm going to move. So you do have to be quite forthright and committed with how you drive, I think, and you get more your way if you do that. So I was noticing, you know, the quicker I was approaching people and just going for the move and being decisive and going for it, the more kind of respect you were given. So people would be like, okay, yeah, this guy's quick, I'm just going to move out of the way. So there was definitely this sort of psychological factor to this event, which I really enjoyed. Through Galgenkopf, this time around the car not wanting to understeer wide into the wall, which is always really helpful if that happens. Under the Audi Sport banner, into the slipstream, making the most of it, past this Mini Cooper, flying past. It really is quite fun when you're going past other cars here on the Dottinger. This is lap number 6 now. The previous lap a 9:24, so the slow zones, the code 60 is really slowing your lap, as I believe this car can easily do a minute quicker than that. It can go 8 minutes, maybe just over 8 minutes per lap at full speed. So an over 9-minute lap, of course very slow, but having to slow down for quite a lot of these code 60s. So this guy is going to move over to the right hand side, a bit of an awkward place as we go through the apex of Niki Lauda, and then thankfully on the brakes able to do the job around the outside, a bit wide here through Bergwerk, but just carrying the speed the best we can and making sure we leave space for our opponent. Now another fairly close call here. I mean, this guy moves to the right, the space just pinches up a little bit, so there's always a bit of a scary moment when you're not sure if they're going to move fully, but thankfully they do. So coming down the hill towards Brunschen, got this fast double left here. Then I love this corner here, this first right hand, it just drops over a little crest and then the car kind of just grips up as you meet the camber on the other side. And then through the right hander of Brunschen, lots of spectators on this part of the track, so you definitely don't want to bin it and end up on an auto addiction video. This is towards the end of the stint now. In fact, this is near enough my final lap of the event. So it's been a good stint so far, not too much in the way of incidents, at least not for myself. Only really 2 cars have actually gone past me. Didn't really come up against the BMW M4 GT4, which would have been interesting actually. I would have liked to see the speed difference. But through the Stefan Beloff S, this part of the track is actually really ropey on full speed and requires a lot of commitment. I mean, this whole track really is about commitment. And I must say, I've really enjoyed this whole race so far, this whole experience of driving this car flat out as fast as I can for 5 laps, or pretty much 6 laps. And this is the end of the final sprint lap now, as I come to an end, or this stint comes to an end. Just trying to navigate this last sequence of corners. My GoPro had overheated by this point, so I wasn't able to cover the finish with that. So through to T13, and that wraps up my sprint laps. And so onto an in-lap. This was just a case of bringing the car home. Just like the outlap, the in-lap doesn't matter. There's nothing riding on it. I don't have to drive it quickly. So it's a case of just safely bringing the car home, getting out of the way of other cars who may well be on a sprint lap. And for example, this car just indicating onto the left, out of the way completely, and not interrupting anyone else's laps. And at the end of this outlap, pulling down the final marker, albeit with a bit of a struggle, as you can see, and that signifies the end of the stint and the end of my first race at the Nurburgring. Amazing stuff, bringing the car into the pit lane in one piece, which always helps.
Woohoo! All in one piece. Congratulations.
First race done.
Yeah.
That was so good. That was so chaotic on that first lap. So much madness going on. So after all of that, you're probably wondering, where on earth did you finish? We finished 11th out of 24. Now the results are quite complicated. It's done on some weird point system. We took a big penalty for using Michelin tyres, mainly because we are practicing for the real big race, which comes next week, the NLS with the GT3 cars. So of course we have to thank Bilstein for putting this whole thing together, Jimmy for being a great teammate, and Misha as well. even though he wasn't driving, for showing up and giving us some support. But most importantly, thank you to you for watching. Tune in very soon for the big NLS races on this channel.